Hi everyone, my name is Monique.
And I'm Naveen from Before You Play.
And welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Board Games, where we pretty much just talk about a few games that we've been playing and how we feel about them.
Yeah, today we have 5 different games, well technically 6, but they're going to be coming out in no particular order and no particular theme, right, today?
No, they're quite
think so.
diverse, right? There's a wide range of mechanics and such. So let's just go straight into them, shall we? Now, before we begin, we do need to mention that all of these games were sent to us as review copies. So let's go ahead and start with the first one. This is actually a game that I covered recently as a solo game, and we wanted to talk about it today so that Naveen had a chance to discuss his opinions.
Sure.
This is a flip and write game designed by Stephen Aramini and published by Right Stuff Games called Fliptown.
Yes, so Fliptown is basically a Western-themed game, Western-themed flip and write, where you are utilizing poker hands to try to get things done as kind of like an outlaw bandit in the Old West. So the way the mechanism basically works is at the very start of a round, you're going to have 3 standard deck cards kind of laid out. And you can use one of those cards towards your ultimate end of round poker hand. One card is going to be dictating the suit, which basically tells you which branching tree you can kind of go down for your roll and write aspect of the game. And then the last one is kind of the value and what you can do when you actually take the action in that designated suit space.
Yes, this game plays up to 4 players, and each player has their own player board. So if you didn't catch the solo video, the player boards are divided into different sections, and the sections are going to be based off of the card suits. So if you assign a heart as your suit, then you're going to be doing things in the heart section of your player board. And then the value, the number card that you use, is going to be the exact number area of that section.
It's like the strength of that section, or this is kind of what you're honing in when you go there, you know. So like in the spade section, you are being a bandit and you're going to the Badlands and you're trying to rob chickens and trains
and cows
and so trying to make a profit in the Old West.
Yes.
The hearts, I think you're trying to just travel along a trail on a horse.
Trail. Yeah, you gain benefits accordingly. There's a town that has, I believe, 13 different buildings, and all the buildings are different in what they offer you. The buildings, I think, are really, really cool and really sort of act as like the engine building aspect of the game, because there's a building that allows you to sort of bet on certain suits. For example, you are hunting outlaws as an example. And so that building allows you to choose between Jack, Queen, and King. And now every time a Jack, Queen, or King, depending on which one you chose, shows up in the 3-card selection, then you gain a benefit. And so all of the buildings act differently. There's also a section that allows you to progress down a mine, and there's also a cemetery. And so the game is played over the course of 3 rounds, and each round you're going to be flipping over 5 different 3-card hands, I guess.
Yeah, so if you're familiar with Texas Hold'em, it's basically like the flop in Texas Hold'em. You're going to lay out 3 cards face up, and so everybody is going to choose their own kind of decision points based off those 3 cards. So it is fairly multiplayer solitaire. There is no real jockeying for like, that's my Queen of Spades or that's your 7 of Diamonds. You just make a decision and kind of take your own path. Yes,
which is why it plays really well solo. And by the way, at the end of the round, because you're choosing one of those 3 cards as your poker hand, then hopefully you would have created a poker hand, a true poker hand by the end of the round, and you'll also gain rewards based off of that. There is a wanted mechanic, and the sheriff kind of goes after you. If you're interested in thematic games, this is a very thematic flip and write, surprisingly, because I feel like it's hard to do that with roll and writes and flip and writes. But even if you just read through the rule book, everything has so much personality, all in the style of this Western theme.
Yeah, as Monique was teaching this game, because she learned it ahead of time, and she was saying, oh, in this area you get to do this. And it's like, wow, that's really cool that like they were able to just integrate all these different things with basically just a standard deck of cards. There is also, I believe, another Texas Hold'em mechanic or something like that, which we haven't really explored.
Yeah, there's a variant. But we haven't tried it.
But I am definitely wanting to do that, because this is definitely one of my favorite roll and writes or flip and writes. It's a genre that there is a lot of games in that kind of category, and so far this one is very, very high up there for me because I really enjoyed my experience with it.
Yeah, it is a heavier one, so there is a larger rule set that you're going to have to digest before playing it. So, and we both really enjoy Fleet the Dice game. That was one of my favorite roll and writes kind of going into this, and now this is joining that league because we really, really, really enjoyed this game. Now, one of the criticisms that I had is that the board is small,
Tiny.
It's tiny, and there's a lot of print on the board. So if people have difficulty kind of seeing small details, that is not something you can ignore. But I believe there is a print and play version of the game that you can purchase for a small amount.
Sure.
And I imagine you can maybe make
Blow
it
it up a
bigger
little bit, yeah.
and print it bigger, I guess. And like Naveen was mentioning, there are different variants. There are asymmetric characters that you can choose from every time you play the game. We still haven't explored all of them. If you play solo, there are solo bots that you can go up against. I did not do that in my playthrough because I find the game to be pretty difficult. This game really sort of rewards people who can find like one path or a few paths, not everything. And I get very tempted to try to do everything.
Yeah, because like there's like the mine. The mine is one of the locations that you can go to. I think that's like if you choose the diamond suit. And that one, it compounds and gets better and better as you go deep. So if you only just dabble a little bit in the mine and dabble just a little bit on that trail and only rob a little bit, then you're not going to really get the higher kind of reward points.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to specialize in at least one or two different directions.
Somewhere at some point, right? And the other thing that I really like about the game is it's not that long. It pretty much plays the same amount of time, depending on analysis paralysis around the table. But it also has very exciting moments at higher player counts, like when people are robbing the chickens and the cows, and sort of there's a luck aspect to the game when flipping over the cards. But just kind of seeing when people succeed and seeing when people are arrested by the sheriff is pretty funny.
Yeah. So anyway, that is Fliptown. This one was on our 2023 most anticipated game, so we finally got to play it a whole year later.
Yes.
But we both have really, really enjoyed it.
Yes.
Fliptown. Okay, the next game we want to talk about, this is designed by Wolfgang Kramer and published by Devir, and it is called Flash 10. Now, Flash 10 is a real-time game in which you are trying to create one single row of cards that go in ascending order. At the very start of the game, there is a deck of cards numbered 0 through 99. You're going to shuffle them all up, distribute 10 cards out to each player face down, and you're going to lay out all of your cards face down in one single row, to all 10 of them. And then basically the game begins. You want to explain it?
At the same time,
Yeah.
once the game begins, everybody is going to simultaneously flip over all of their cards. Then the rest of the deck is going to be placed in a pile, not a stack, but it's just a messy pile in the middle of the table, all face down. Because at the same time, everybody is just going to be picking up one card at a time, looking at it, and then you must place that card on top of one of the cards that are in front of you. Because again, the object of the game is to get your cards that are in front of you in ascending order from left to right. You want to be the first person to do that. So that is pretty much the entire game.
Yep.
You're just racing to try to make sure those numbers are in ascending order by constantly flipping over one card, covering up one of the cards in front of you, and you just keep on going like that. It's a very fast, real-time game. There are some other aspects to it, like there are thunderstorm cards, and there are cards that have like lightning bolts on them. For such a small game, the rules were a little bit confusing as to what those do. I know the thunderstorm cards act as sort of a wild in the sense that it does not break an ascending or descending line, so you can basically put it on top of anything and it'll still count as ascending. The lightning bolt ones, I believe, if the game ends because the entire pile runs out, then you actually score points. And for each thunderstorm card you have, it's -1 point. But for each lightning card, it's +1 point. And you also get 1 point for each card that's actually ascending from left to right.
That's if it goes to final scoring.
Yes.
That final scoring only happens if after everybody has been drawing and pulling cards, there's no legal placement or there's no more cards to place, then you go into final scoring.
Yeah, there's always legal placement because you're just covering up a card. But basically, if nobody was successful in time and you run out of the cards first, I believe that is when you go into this final scoring.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, whoever actually gets all of their cards in ascending order first just wins.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
we've played this 3 players primarily,
Yeah.
and it plays up to 5. So I'm thinking it goes to final scoring
In
a
higher
higher player count
because the same
more
number
cards
of
are out there.
cards. Yeah. So the box says it's 20 minutes. It is not 20 minutes. This is a very, very fast game, especially if you're playing with gamers who are kind of good at that for some reason.
Yeah, our games lasted 2 minutes,
2 minutes, yeah,
3 minutes,
very,
yeah.
very fast. I'm assuming it's 20 minutes on the box because you're playing several
It's
rounds
like
of
first
it,
to
I
three,
guess.
probably first to five, whatever you want to make it. So
Yes.
they had to put a number on the box, but
Yeah.
one round could be literally 2 minutes.
There are also some variants that you can play. We did not try any of the variants. We just played the game as is, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Now, this game is going to appeal to very specific types of gamers, I believe. I was the one who liked it the least, I will say. This one was definitely not for me, so much so that both Naveen and Michael were laughing at me around the table.
We
because
thought it
they
was
both-
perfectly fine.
They
Yeah.
both enjoyed it more.
Yeah, it's not pretending to be anything that it's not.
Yes,
You know,
it is exactly what we explained.
yeah, it's exactly what
Yeah.
we explained. Right when you explained it, I'm like, oh great, okay. So I'm just picking up a card,
Yeah.
making a semi-educated decision. Obviously, there's a whole other stack of cards out there.
Yeah.
So if I have like a 65 and a 67, and I draw the 66, it's like, well, okay, I'm just gonna put it over one of these. So I don't know. I enjoyed it for what it was. It's nothing like that's gonna make a top 10 list or anything
Sure,
like that.
sure.
But it's enjoyable for me.
Yeah, for people who like real time or just something to do quickly, I guess. That's literally what it is.
Or if you're tired in between games and you're like, it's a little too late for coffee, but I still want to keep playing, play Flash 10. It'll probably wake you up and get you ready for your next big, heavy game.
Yeah, you do need some space. So it's not something that you could probably take to a restaurant or anything like that. It's not a card game like that just because you need to have that pile in the middle.
Yep.
But that's essentially it,
yeah.
honestly. Wasn't for me, but you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I think it's okay.
All right. Well, there you go. That is Flash 10. All right. So speaking of real-time games, the next game that we're going to be talking about is another real-time game. This is a game designed by Hjalmar Haak and Lorenzo Silva and published by Horrible Guild. And it is called Quicksand, the Real-Time Cooperative Challenge. So this is a real-time game that has sand timers. And so the way that this game works is there's a ring of tiles that are set up around the table, depending on which scenario you play, because this game is scenario-based. And each tile is going to be one of 3 colors and one of 3 shapes. And so the object of the game is to try to get all of the sand timers to the very end of that line past the danger zone.
There's like a
And
finish
so
line.
There is a finish line, yes. And you're just basically trying to get all the sand timers past it. Now, we don't know exactly how long the timers are. I believe in the rulebook it just says like slow, medium, and fast.
I remember I calculated it. I can't remember now what it was.
But the scenario tells you which ones you're going to use. And so the way that the game works is each player around the table will have a hand of cards. And so players will be taking turns playing one card from their hand and activating the sand timers that are on all of the tiles of either that color or that shape, depending on what card you played.
And when you say activating, it means flipping them to the opposite side.
Yes, you flip it to the opposite side and you progress it one tile, as long as there is no sand timer on that tile already.
So what that means is there's no leapfrogging. So if, let's say, you played a card that was going to flip sand timer that's in space number 2, and there's another sand timer right in front of it, all you would have done is just flip that sand timer, but not actually progressed anything forward towards that finish line.
Exactly. And that's actually key because of the fact that the sand timers are different speeds and the fact that you flip over every sand timer that's on that given shape or color. That's actually a really key part of the game. And so if ever a sand timer runs out of time, then you don't necessarily lose immediately. You just place the sand timer off of the board and it keeps going. And there is a mechanic for you to get it back onto the board, onto that tile. But if it runs out of sand again, then you lose the game. Also, if you get a sand timer past that fault line, the finish line, and it runs out of time, then you also lose the game.
Yeah, because you got to get all of them across the finish line. So if the game sets you up with 3 of them, you do not finish the game until you actually get all 3 across. At that point, then you immediately win.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the basic gist of the game. There are scenarios that make the game more difficult because of the way they stack the sand timers in the beginning of the game. And there are also scenarios, of course, that make it so that you can't talk, which makes it a lot more difficult. But that is pretty much Quicksand in a nutshell. Now, this kind of falls in the same line as some other sand timer real-time games that we've played. Kites, yes.
Yeah,
Kites was the most recent example of that. Now, in Kites, if you're not familiar with that game, that is another sand timer real-time game. But the difference is there really is nothing else. It's just the sand timers. There are a bunch of them. They're all different colored. And everybody kind of goes around just flipping them over, trying to keep the kites in the air, essentially.
Yeah, you play a card, very similar to like this one. This one, you also play a card. And then if the card has that color, then you flip that respective color. That is Kites.
Yes.
Quicksand is similar in that kind of mechanism.
Similar in the mechanism of the sand timers. timer, but this one feels quite different because that one felt more of like a party game. Like you're all kind of laughing, like trying to keep all the sand timers, and then there are different modes of play that make ridiculous things happen around the table. This one is like you're trying to strategically play your cards so that you're flipping over the sand timers at the right time to just get them past the finish line.
I think that's what it was about that.
There's laughing in that one, and there's no laughing.
It was
in this
more
one.
head down, head down, and like let's just get this done.
Yeah.
Kind of feel, at least in our plays of it, versus in kites. Yeah, it's more like lackadaisical, kind of like you're feeling like you're on like a balance beam, just trying to make it happen.
Knocking over the sand timers an accident, you're laughing about that. This one is not like that at all.
It doesn't feel that way.
It doesn't feel that way. This one is more strategic. So it really just depends on your interest. I thought this one was fine. It's not really one that I feel like I need to gravitate towards again.
Yeah, it's like it's not one that I guess if I was to choose between the two, they're right on the same like kind of playing line for me.
Oh, okay.
I would play it. It's not something that I would say like, I don't really want to play that.
Yeah.
But it's not one that I'm like saying, hey everybody, Quicksand, like let's start with this game.
I mean, it's a fast game. Like the scenarios are like 10 minutes, depending on which one you're playing, and you can do several. And it does play up to 7 players, which does make this more difficult potentially. Like I played this at 3 and at 2, and the 2-player game was significantly easier than the 3-player game.
Because it just goes back to you. So it's like mentally you're like, well, I know if you just do something, I have the card to then do the other thing. In a 6-player game, it's like, oh, I've done my duty. Like, that's changed. So like now you're basically, when it comes back to you, if 4 people have already taken a turn, now you're looking at your hand of cards, you're like, that's nothing that like I was planning for at all.
You can't plan, basically. So that is something to consider. We have not tried playing this at that higher player count. Anywho, that is Quicksand. All right, next up we have a deduction game. So this game is designed by Johan Levitt and published by Ludenat, and it is called ArcheOlogic. This is designed by the same designer as Turing Machine. And so it is a very similar concept if you've played Turing Machine, in the sense that you are trying to use logic in order to solve something first around the table. But the difference is Turing Machine was all numbers. It almost felt like a math exercise every time you played that. Yep. This is all spatial. Polyomino tiles. So everybody gets a board, and they all have the same set of polyomino tiles. And I believe the theme is you are archaeologists uncovering a dig site, something like that.
Yeah.
The theme is a bit lost to me, but basically you're trying to figure out where all of these polyomino tiles that represent buildings exist on your player board for that scenario. So each scenario has one answer, and you're trying to be the first person to figure out that configuration on your board. The game comes with this machine, sort of similar to Turing Machine, except it is unique to this game. It's this doohickey, that's what I like to call it.
Yeah.
And you basically put the scenario thing against it, and you ask it questions. And so the questions on your turn are going to be stuff like, how many small buildings are along this axis? Because your player board is divided into different rows and columns.
It's a 5x5. So there's like A through E on the top, and then 1 through 5 on the sides.
Yes.
So it's a grid.
Right. And so the main board is actually going to rotate in terms of what axis you're focusing on whose turn. So at the start of your turn, you actually rotate that token around the main board that'll tell you what axis you're focusing on to ask your question. So you don't necessarily have the choice. Now, if you've played a game like the Search for Planet X in the past, there's also a turn order mechanism that this game employs that Turing Machine did not. And so in this game, it's going to be whoever's pawn is furthest in the back is going to be going next. And the reason why that's important is because everything in this game costs a certain amount of time. And so as an example, on your turn, if you don't want to ask a question about that specific axis, which again is either a row or column on your player board, then you can spend time to either move it forward or to move it to any axis that you want. So you do always have a choice as to what axis you're going to be asking.
And every time you spend time, you're going to leapfrog over your opponents,
yes,
and then go out in front, most likely, so that then the next person is going to go whoever's furthest back. So if you spend too much time, then you might wait a lot of time before it's your turn
Before
again.
It's your next turn, which is going to be really important in determining how much you enjoy the game, I think.
Sure.
But then you ask your question. And your questions are going to be stuff like, how many small buildings exist along this axis? All of the buildings also have certain symbols that I believe are called traps. And each axis, which is a row or column, is only going to have at most 3 of these symbols. Now, one thing I didn't mention is on your board, you're also going to have exactly 3 blank spaces. And that's important because that's another question you can ask. You can ask how many blank spaces are along this axis. You can ask something more specific if you want to, like which symbols from this specific tile exist along this axis. And the more specific your question is, the more time you'll have to spend. And so you pretty much continue playing like this with everybody taking turns, depending on who is furthest back or furthest behind on this time track until you figured out the solution. And at that point, when you figured it out on your turn, instead of asking a question, you progress forward 4 spaces on the time track and you sit there until it is your turn again. Then you can check the solution. And that is pretty much the entire game in a nutshell. And the level of difficulty is going to be based off of how many clues you want to start with before you start the game.
Yeah, I think you can select 3, 4, or 5, but obviously you can house rule it, I think, and do even less or even no clues if you want, but that makes it very, very difficult.
Yeah, it just makes it longer, I'd say.
Yeah.
So we played this game. We actually brought it to a local convention recently, and we played it a couple of times at 4 players. And then when we came home, Naveen was so into it that he was like, let's play this more. So we played it a lot more times at 2 players. And so what do you think about it?
Yeah, I like it a lot. So I like deduction games, right?
Yeah.
So like we like Turing Machine. We really like Alchemists. And those are the 2 that really come to mind right now.
I would say deduction is one of the mechanics that we both enjoy the most.
Yes.
If ever there's a deduction game, we are interested.
Yeah.
Like we want to play it definitely.
Search for Planet X.
We
that's another one.
love the Search for Planet X. That's probably one of our favorite deduction games, right?
Yep.
Would you
Oh, yeah.
say? I really, really enjoyed Cryptid. I think I like that one more than
You've
did.
had more experience than I have with Cryptid. I would play it again though, but I think I want to play it at higher player counts.
Yeah.
Because lower player counts not so good.
Growing up, I really, really loved Clue. Like that was my favorite of the classic, I guess, store-bought board games. But this game, if you are familiar with Turing Machine, feels quite different because Turing Machine is all based off of numbers, and it really doesn't have this turn structure mechanic where you make decisions based off of when you are going to take a turn next. The race element of Turing Machine was almost a bit strange because it's really based off of who used the most number of clues. And when you play with people who really like deduction games, then you're really sort of min-maxing how, like, the difference is just one clue
One point,
a lot
it's
of
like,
times.
Oh, you won because you did 4 and I
Yeah.
did 5. Ah, dang.
Right.
Like,
Whereas a game like this, you're making decisions based off how much further you're going to progress up this track. So it really sort of determines where you want to go questions-wise, and there is a bit more of a game to it, I suppose.
a little bit, yeah.
Than
Like,
Turing Machine.
for me, it didn't like when we're playing those 4-player. We played several 4-player games, and I didn't feel like I was in major competition with everybody else.
Because it was so hard.
It was hard, so it's like you're like head down, you're like thinking, you're like, okay, wait,
Yeah,
put this polyomino
everybody-
here, and like, why is that not working? Like, okay, so I guess I'm gonna have to wait for my turn again. And then you find out a little bit more information. You're like, I still can't solve it.
Yeah,
So,
everybody was in the same boat of being
Yeah.
lost. Like that was the early plays
Yep.
of playing this game. I mean, if you're not like a whiz at the spatial aspect of it, it's probably going to be pretty difficult the first 2 games of this you play. I feel like the more you play it, the easier it gets, but it's still pretty difficult.
yeah, even though I'm kind of describing it as like head down multiplayer solitaire, we still enjoyed our time around the table, like all having that same kind of anxiety about trying to get this thing solved and being
Yeah.
the first one to solve it. So is it like is 4 players going to make the game better for you? I don't know. That really is going to be group dependent on how you socialize with the people that are around you. For us, we really enjoyed it, just being the 4 of us together playing it.
I like the people that we were playing with.
Yeah.
Like we were playing with really good friends.
Yeah.
I do think I enjoyed the 2-player game more.
You just get to take your
because
turn more.
You
You
take
get
your
to go
turn
right at it.
more
Yeah.
often, and when you are playing it, even at higher player counts, it's a really quiet experience because you are constantly trying to figure out. You're trying to move your shapes around. The components, by the way, are a bit fiddly because
yes.
your board is small. And the chits that you use, like when you get hints at the beginning of the game, you have to put these markers on your board to indicate where those specific symbols are on your board, and then now you're putting the polyomino tiles sort of on top of it, and
And
things
they
get
end up,
shifted.
They end up doing this thing
Yeah.
where it's not a recess board where you
No.
can put the fixed information that you get before the round even starts. It would be so much better if I know it would increase costs of this game. I'm pretty sure they were trying to keep costs down.
Right.
But if you had something that could at least have those given to you clues sitting inside so that your polyomino tiles can actually sit flat, so that when you're starting to manipulate and move things and you just need that one tile to fit in there, you didn't end up moving everything away and you're like, I got to bring it all back. So
Yeah, because we had
That happens a lot.
one player on the table whose game was sort of a little bit a little bit messed up
Messed up,
because one of the tiles had shifted, and so she was basing her deduction off of a wrong clue. You know what I
Something
mean?
just shifted one box
Yeah.
over, and then over the course of just getting other polyominoes on top and taking them off and putting them back on, didn't realize that it had shifted, and
Yeah.
then that became her new truth, and then it became a
Yes,
problem.
and that's
for
a
her.
problem.
Yeah.
And even like the player screens, they're doing like a 2-screen thing. They're really tiny. It's almost
Yeah.
like this is not that useful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the screens are really flimsy. They don't
Yeah.
really block because you are taking notes on a little
Yeah.
like a sheet of paper. I definitely felt kind of compressed like this.
Yes.
You know, obviously, like don't look over at your neighbor, but you know,
Yeah,
It
it's
is
not
what
it's
it
not
is,
the
you know?
most useful screen.
Yeah, it's kinda tiny.
The notes, the paper notes for taking notes, by the way, are literally blank sheets of paper.
Yeah.
So unlike Turing Machine that sort of held your hand in terms of how to organize your note taking, this one does not. So I do find it to be a bit more of a difficult game. I don't know how it would be for people who are not math focused. Like we both I don't know about you. I enjoy math. So for me, Turing Machine was great because of that. But for people who really don't enjoy numbers and really did not like Turing Machine for that reason, maybe this might be your style.
Maybe, yeah.
I will say the one thing that I really appreciate about this game is with Turing Machine, the setup in between each game was such just removing the cards. Like each game of Turing Machine was very fast.
Yeah.
And then you would have to put all the cards back in numerical order and then
never
choose a
shuffle
scenario.
that deck of cards in Turing Machine. Do not
Yeah, that
do
would be
it.
a nightmare.
Big problem.
But then you would choose the next scenario, then you would have to find all the cards again. This is literally you just remove the disc and choose the next one, and
Yeah.
then you're ready to play again.
And I'm pretty sure this has replay value. I can't remember. There's a fairly a decent amount of a stack in there. And what we've done is there's an inset or an inlay inside this box. And anytime we've done a scenario, it's now sitting underneath that. So we're hyper aware that we're not going to be doing a scenario over.
Right.
But honestly, if you put this on your shelf 4 months later, you pull it off and you play it again, and you're going to play the very first scenario you ever did. You're not going to remember
There is
that.
no way
Yeah.
you're going to remember the configuration of these tiles on your board. based
Unless
off
you
of
have
that.
one of those memories, but I would imagine that's a very rare
I
case.
also think there is now an app or something that produces many more scenarios. So it's similar to Turing Machine. It's going to be a very, very replayable game. But again, very different experience because this is all abstract spatial reasoning, whereas Turing Machine was numbers. So, anywho, that is ArcheOlogic in a nutshell. What
Yeah.
are your final thoughts on this, I guess?
I really like it. I want to play it again. Yeah, like it's really, really good.
Yeah, I really, really like this game. I think I might like it more than Turing Machine because of some of the nitty-gritty things that I talked about and the fact that I do find it refreshing when it's a spatial puzzle. It makes my brain work in a different way that is satisfying when you can figure it out.
Yeah, because this one, it feels more like you're banging your head against the wall
Yeah.
trying to like
It's tough.
this tile. It says that there's this many symbols in this row, and there's X amount of buildings
Yeah.
also in that same row. So I know this symbol goes here because that's the truth that was given to me. Like, why can't I get this thing to fit?
And sometimes all you need to do is flip the tile.
Sometimes
Right?
you just,
Just
I just
rotate
rotated
it.
it, but you just get so like hard-headed sometimes about
Yeah.
like, I know this is here, this is here. These are the only two tiles. Why can't I figure it out? Oh, I just rotate it and that's good. But sometimes you just can't see it. So that kind of feeling of that puzzle is
Yeah,
really, really
the
fun.
puzzle aspect.
Yeah.
That is exactly it. It's the puzzle that is so satisfying, and just the setup in between was just so much better for me.
The setup is nice, yes.
Yeah. So, anywho, that is ArcheOlogic.
Okay, the last game we want to talk about is actually 2 games, but they are very, very similar. These are designed by Richard Garfield, and we have King of Tokyo, the Monster Box, as well as King of Tokyo Origins.
Yes, these are both extreme versions of the base game, which is just called King of Tokyo, and they're both published by Aiello. So this might be a surprising one that we're featuring on our channel because this is technically a gateway game, I believe.
It's one of the first ones that we were really into when we first got into the hobby, or as we were discovering that we were enjoying the hobby.
Yes. And if you've never played this game before, it is basically a monster battler dice chucking game where everybody plays as a kaiju, a different kaiju, think like Godzilla. And you are basically trying to enter Tokyo and score, be the first person to score 20 points or be the last monster standing because every player starts with 10 health and you're going to be battling each other by dealing damage. Now, on your turn, you're going to be rolling dice and you're going to be saving certain symbols depending on what you you want to do on your turn. Some symbols will allow you to gain health. Some symbols will allow you to deal damage. And when dealing damage, it's going to be dependent on where you are. So if you are in Tokyo, then you are dealing damage to everybody else around the table because depending on the player count, only one monster can be in Tokyo at any given time. And the opposite is true. If you are not in Tokyo, then you are only dealing damage to the monster who is in Tokyo.
Yep.
You can also gain points depending on the dice that you save. And there are also symbols that allow you to gain power.
It's like a currency in the game.
Yes, because you're going to use them to purchase cards that'll allow you to do cool things. And so that is a big aspect of the game, the card building part.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with it, in Tokyo, when you're there at the start of your turn, if you are in Tokyo, you're going to gain a victory point. And so that's one of the ways you can try to rack up those points. So obviously then that puts a target on your back. Nobody wants you to be king of the hill, so then they're going to start to attack you. But then that means that they're taking away from, your opponents are taking away from the things that they want to do, which is either get into Tokyo or try to get better cards. So
when you hit the monster in Tokyo, the monster in Tokyo cannot gain health there.
Cannot, yeah.
So you have sort of a timer as to how long you can stay in there. And whenever somebody hits you, you have the option of leaving. That is essentially it. And that is how both of these games play. The only difference is what they come with. Now, before we talk about these specific boxes, I do want to mention that I do think that King of Tokyo is a very well-designed game. I think it is a great game. It is not one that we play very often anymore. We did play it, when we were getting into the hobby because it's a dice chucking game that is just silly fun kind of thing.
Yeah, we didn't play it really two-player though.
This is a higher player, in my opinion.
Count, yeah.
I mean, I think depending on, people who really, really enjoy the game and have played it a ton, you might have different opinions on this. But I do think it shines best at like four players, something like that. But this is a game that families really love, especially kids. Kids really love King of Tokyo.
Yeah, we gifted King of Tokyo to your little brother.
Yeah, my little brother, when he was still small. That was like the one game that he would play with us. And so this definitely has like a very strong cult following. Now, over the years, King of Tokyo has been expanded to include more kaiju monsters that come with their own special mechanics. There is the Halloween monsters that also comes with orange dice. The power-up expansion that comes with these evolution cards. I believe the Halloween monsters also come with costume cards, and all of those, or a lot of those extras, are all in the monster box. So that is why this one is so much bigger. The monster box actually comes with the base game. So if you don't have the original and you're looking to get something with sort of an all-in, then the monster box is probably your closest bet.
Out there,
It doesn't have literally everything out there, but it has a good amount, I'd say. Now,
plenty of content to play King of Tokyo, and this one plays up to 6.
Yes. Now, if you're looking for the other extreme, that is where King of Tokyo Origins comes into play. This is a new version of King of Tokyo that only supports up to 4 players. At higher player counts, another person can enter Tokyo, like you can have 2 people in there. But for people who only play up to 4, or for people who are new to this whole thing, this whole series of games, I guess, King of Tokyo Origins is sort of, you are the target audience for this.
Right.
Now, I believe right now this is a Target exclusive, but just so you know, it comes with 4 new monsters that have never been seen before. Now, we have not played the base game enough to know about the balance and just how well the power cards in this kind of line up or compare to the other games in the series. We don't know that much at all. But all I know is this is a sort of a smaller package for anybody who's just looking for a smaller price point and just a smaller package for King of Tokyo in general. But otherwise, that is pretty much it. They are both, again, extremes of the base game, which is King of Tokyo. So if you enjoy King of Tokyo, I would love to hear what your preferred way of playing is. But anyway, that is Origins and the Monster Box.
Well, there you have it. Those are some of the games that we've been playing recently. If you've played any of these games, please let us know what you think about them in the comments down below. If you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to also leave those in the comments. We'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. And lastly, if you like these kind of videos and you want to see more in the future, please consider subscribing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.